All right, we get to do this once a year, and that's check in with Allen Trieu once everything is done after the regular signing period. But this is kind of like, I guess, the dessert, Allen, for signing days now because the early signing period has taken so much away from it. But I want to get your thoughts because Brett Bielema brought up yesterday, before we dive into the Illinois class, that he would love a July signing period to go along with December and January. I just want to get your thoughts as someone who's covering this so well nationally, especially in the Big Ten and Midwest. What do you think about how this is all set up right now?
I do think they seem a little bit close together. And that's why you see so much activity on the first signing day and so much less activity on the second signing day. And so I think the question is whether or not that's redundant. If you're going to have most of the kids. Now, I do think that it does allow kids some grace period. And in a way, it's nice that the Division II and the FCS schools get a little spotlight yesterday. Like that's most of what's going on, honestly. And that's in the PWOs. But as far as like, if we're talking about major college recruiting, most of the hay's in the barn in December. So I do think, and now with the transfer portal period happening, it just makes December extremely busy. And I'm not speaking for us because we don't really matter in the machine. But for college coaches, it's like December, if you're going through bowl practices or you are a new staff trying to figure it out, there's a lot going on. And I don't know that setup is the best. And for the kids, I think if you know exactly where you want to go in July or August, I don't see a reason. There's enough protections put in place now with coaching changes to where you're not stuck if your coach gets fired. So I do think that those plan B's and C's, some of those little, like allowances for when those coaching changes happen, that's the important part of it. Other than that, I do think that something needs to change. I don't know if that's July signing day solution, but something they need to talk about it for sure.
I think it'd be similar to basketball, right? It works out pretty well for them. Let's dive into Illinois' class. Right now, Allen is number 43 nationally, number 8 Big Ten. There's very little between, I guess, 6 and 10 in the Big Ten. But just overall, what do you make of this class for Brett Bielema in his second full recruiting cycle?
Yeah, so it's funny. We were sitting there on BTN yesterday, and we had Malik Elzy in the studio, and we were talking about Kaden Feagin and some of the other top guys in the class. And it's like, it didn't seem like that long ago. And it wasn't that long ago that we were sitting in the same studio showing the map and going like, they signed 0 from Illinois. Like, that was like 3 years ago. And so I think that they've done a good job there. And we thought at first, like, it's going to take a minute. They'll get some guys in state. They're going to find some sleepers. They're going to find the Matthew Baileys and those kind of guys. But are they going to win battles in state? And when you get guys like Malik Elzy in the class, and I always say that we focus a lot too on the guys that sign, but a measure of how well you recruit is also the battles that you're in. You're there on Roderick Pierce. You're there on Jamel Howard. They did a good job. And so I think top to bottom, they've done a good job of re-emphasizing the state, re-emphasizing the Midwest. And I think that really pays off when you see not just the in-state guys, but guys like Colin Dixon, et cetera, I think are good gets.
Yeah, 20 in-state kids over the last 2 recruiting classes compared to that 0 infamously in 2020. Let's talk about the big one now that he made it official, signing last December. All-American Bowl kid, Chicago Simeon 4-star wide receiver Malik Elzy. What does he bring to Illinois both as a player and just being Malik Elzy, 4-star recruit out of Chicago Simeon?
Yeah, I mean, I think for Illinois, anytime that you can get a Chicago Public League kid in and into the class and there's a recruitable kid there, it's important to win that battle. We talked to him a little bit about that on the air yesterday, and he's hoping to create a Chicago pipeline. And there's more guys coming when you look at what they've got coming up at Morgan Park and Kenwood and Simeon and schools like that. So on the just symbolic end, I think it's extremely important. On the field, though, I mean, you're getting a guy who's going to step into that room and look like the rest of the guys in there. He's 6'3", maybe better, 6'3", almost 200 pounds. and uses that size extremely well. Very productive at Simeon. And I think initially, he kind of got stuck in that 88, 89 area for us for a long time. And some of that was just like, he's so dominant in that public school league. Let's see what he does outside of that. He went to OT7, was a top performer there. Whenever they played, a better school, any of the top schools in the public league or on their non-conference schedule, he did very well. And then at the All-American Bowl, he really cemented his status. And that wasn't, I had been pushing for him, but I wanted the national guys to come back and say, like, yes, this is without a doubt a 4-star. And that's exactly what happened in San Antonio.
Is he a guy that can make an immediate impact?
I think so. I think when you look at his size and, like I said, having gone out and competed at that level, I think he's ready to go from those standpoints. And I think he will bring some things that maybe they don't have a ton of on the roster. I think certainly you can get him involved in some red zone packages because he can go up and get the football and use his size. And so I think if you look at the class as a whole, and in terms of talent and physical readiness, he's probably one of the most likely to be able to see the field.
As you look at the rest of this class, Allen, is there any personal favorites of yours that you say, hey, that's a big get for them? Yeah, it's a lot of other 3-star prospects in this class, but any personal favorites of yours?
So actually, you brought this guy to my attention yesterday, the new guy in the class. I don't know how you say his last name. Is it Resetich?
That's right. Yeah.
That is, we were talking about this yesterday as well on the air with the early signing period and how early recruiting goes now. A kid like that can get lost in the shuffle. And I think traditionally the schools in the Big Ten, like Iowa and Wisconsin, have done a really good job of finding that guy in their state. They don't let those guys slide by. And I have this theory that because you can make some mistakes recruiting guys too early, being able to sit and wait for a senior riser is extremely important. And I will bet that the handful of guys that signed yesterday in the Big Ten, the late finds like Mac, are going to hit. I bet a lot of those guys will hit because they're senior evals. And when you look at that kid's athleticism and versatility, he's one of the ones that I look at and say, like, that's a good find. I think Brandon Henderson has as much upside as anybody in the class. Like, if you ask me, like, who else in this class among kind of the 3 stars in the middle grouping composite wise could end up getting drafted someday? I think when you look at Alex Palczewski and Vidarian Lowe and some of those guys that were ranked in the same area that ended up having good careers and professional futures, I think Brandon Henderson, because he hasn't played football for very long, maybe a little overshadowed by some of those other guys at East St. Louis. I think he might have more upside than those guys. He's just not as polished.
Yeah, and that says a lot given the talent that has been at East St. Louis here the past couple of years. Kaden Feagin, I want to get your thoughts on him. Central Illinois kid, hasn't played the highest level of competition, but that was a big recruiting win to start. Just what do you think about him as a prospect? Because, I mean, he's got potential to play offense, to play defense, but he is probably going to have a huge learning curve as he started as an early enrollee here.
Yeah, he was a tough eval, an easy eval in some ways because you have a guy that big, that fast, that versatile. It's pretty obvious that he's going to at least be in the high 80s. As far as the rest of that eval goes, he's a guy that we argued a little bit about because competition wasn't very good. And honestly, for the first few years of his career, he was good, but we wanted to see him. We were like, this guy should absolutely just dominate his competition. I think we started to see more of that as a senior. And so I think the trajectory is headed in the right direction. I think it's about finding the right spot. I know they're talking to him about offense, and we can definitely see that. Certainly has the size and ability to play other positions too. I think the good thing for him is that at Brett Bielema's stops, he's had a lot of these kind of bigger positionless out of high school guys who maybe haven't quite found the right fit yet. And he's always seems to find the right place to put those guys. And so I think even going back to Wisconsin, they did a really good job. He's done a really good job of that. And so I have confidence they'll find the right place for him. But I think initially on offense, you look at that size and speed, and then he's even returned kicks at the prep level. Usually that bodes pretty well for your success. So he's going to have a little bit of an adjustment, obviously, but he's got the physical gifts to do it.
I want to ask you about defensive line. You brought up 2 of the tougher misses in the class, and Roderick Pearson, Jamel Howard. You had two chances at both those guys. They end up going to Big Ten rivals. Pierce first to Wisconsin, then Michigan, and then of course Jamel Howard sticks with Wisconsin on signing day. But they went and Terrence Jameson found three guys, and Alex Bray, Mason Moragan, and Jeremiah Warren that I know you've evaluated here, Allen. So what do you think of how they put together that D-line class when they did miss on their guys from Chicago?
I think that defensive line, that's like offensive line. It's a developmental position for the most part, unless you pull the absolute top of the board, ready-made guys, which Georgia and Alabama and places like that do. You're going to have to develop these guys. And I think these guys all have very good developmental potential, and they all come from really good high schools. If you throw Pat Farrell at St. Rita in there as well, these guys were all extremely productive at winning high schools. Mason Moragan won several state titles. Jeremiah Warren won state titles. Alex Bray, extremely productive. I actually think he, of that group, might have the most left as far as upside and ceiling goes, because he's explosive, makes a ton of plays. And the other guys are going to be, like, you talk about a reliable group of guys. I think the bust potential for any of those four as a group is extremely low. Like, those guys are going to play. Those guys are going to be good program guys. Those guys are going to work really hard. Those guys have been productive. They will be productive. I think you can feel really safe going to bed at night knowing that those guys are going to play a lot of football for Illinois based on their pedigree and what they've already accomplished in high school. Jeremiah Warren, to me, great find at the end of the cycle. I've watched Belleville High School a ton, talked to their coaches a ton. They were always just kind of flabbergasted that at a position that doesn't have a ton of bodies in the North, like defensive tackle, that he didn't get more traction, and then it came there right at the end.
I've got two more quick ones for you, Allen. Another Midwest kid, Colin Dixon, Ohio wide receiver, one-time Wisconsin commit. I mean, Elzy's going to get the shine as he should, but how big of a get was Colin Dixon? What do you think of him?
Yeah, I remember when we first put him on, I think it was his sophomore going to his junior year when we evaluated him. He didn't have any offers at the time, and we were like, that guy's at least a mid, if not a high 3-star. Like, he impressed us on film right away. And he was a guy we thought might be able to project to some other positions like linebacker. He's a big kid. He's put together. I think what he showed as a senior was a little bit more big playability. We thought maybe a guy who's going to work more of the intermediate routes, do decent after the catch, but maybe not this big play guy. But that happened more as a senior. He runs well after the catch. He's physical, strong, hard to bring down. And really just like I said, we thought he was a good player before. I thought he had a great senior year. And when you look at the statistics and you compare the film, I think he's headed in the right direction. And good job by Illinois there to stay in contact with him. Got him to campus even before he officially decommitted. And we're kind of Johnny on the spot once he reopened things.
Well, now that 2023 has come to a close, everyone's asking, well, what about 2024? So I'll ask you, Allen. This is the highest ranked recruiting class Illinois has had. For preps since 2011. So what do you think they can do in 2024? Are there any prospects you think are ones we should have interest in here?
Yeah. So, I mean, I always think that the benefits of a good season, it kind of takes a minute to cycle your way through. I do think it helped Illinois down the stretch to, have the season that they had. But I think that you're really going to see it pay dividends in this class. And so I think, the guys that have been paying attention, if you look inside the state, you would love to be able to try to get another Malik Elzy, Kaden Feagin type win. If you can get a guy, like a Luke Williams, it's going to get harder on Marquise Easley and Marquise Lightfoot. Those guys are going to be tough wins. I stopped at Morgan Park before the BTN show, and Tyshawn Griffin mentioned Illinois right away. I think they're going to battle probably Purdue and Wisconsin there. That feels to me like a kid that's not going to leave the Big Ten. I think Illinois is going to be right there. Chris James is his coach. And so he's going to have Illinois is going to be very much in the picture on him. Austin Alexander just decommitted from Wisconsin and mentioned Illinois right away as a school that he wants to visit. And so I think they're going to have a good shot with him as well. And I think he's a really good prospect. I think maybe at the moment he's kind of trying to figure it out. It all came at him at once. It's like he's committed to Wisconsin 1 minute and then USC comes in and offers. So he's kind of like, whoa. I think he's another guy that when push comes to shove, I would guess that he sticks in the Midwest. I know he likes Purdue, likes Iowa State as well. So Tyshawn Griffin, Austin Alexander, those are the two kind of top 15 to 20 in-state guys that I think they're going to have a really good shot with.
Yeah, the Purdue recruiting battles could be interesting moving forward with Ryan Walters.
Yeah, there's going to be a few of those. Yeah.
Yeah, Kevin Kane, a Chicagoland recruiter as well. Allen Trieu, appreciate your insight as always, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.